Hey everybody, and welcome to the Ghost Biker Garage. I am your host, the Ghost Biker, and we have a great guest tonight. We're going to be talking about a lot of cool different things that is something that I've always been interested in, but is not my field of study, which would be UFOs, UAPs, and other unexplained phenomena such as that. So we're going to get into that here in just a few minutes, but I wanted to say hello to Michelle, Steve, Janet, Russ. Thank you all for coming on here. If anyone has any questions for tonight's guest, I'll be manning the chat room. I'm going to be pulling the comments up onto the screen, but if you have a specific question, we're going to wait until we get to a break in the conversation and we'll be able to ask our questions to tonight's guest. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk about just a little bit of business. I know that if you guys follow my personal page as well as the Ghost Biker page, you saw that we made a little announcement this week. We're going to be talking about it a little bit more a little later on. But my business partner, Dr. Chris Sumner from Soul Sisters Paranormal, and we created a business, History, Highways, and Haunts, LLC, and we're going to be based out of the old historic Scott County Jail in Huntsville, Tennessee. Again, not going to go too far into that, but I do want to thank everyone that has helped us. We dropped the news, and everyone that's helped us spread the word and try to get everything out there. As most of you know, these things take time. We've been working on this the majority of the year, and it's exciting that we're actually able now to put that information out there and start dropping some teasers about that. So if you haven't gone on and liked the historic Scott County Jail page, please go on and do so, because we are about to drop a website and drop some more interesting information on that. So again, we won't go too far into that, but again, thank everyone for helping us get the word out. Also been filming for season 4, had an investigation this weekend in Virginia, and just about to wrap up all the filming for season 4 now, and we'll be working on going through all this evidence. We traveled last week up to Kentucky for 2 investigations, Virginia for a second part of an investigation that I did earlier this year for special experiment that I'm doing that's going to come out on one of the different episodes that we'll talk more about at a later date as well. But just kind of getting back in the stream of things and trying to get caught up. So again, thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll talk about a little more business as things go on about some events that's coming up. I mean, we're here in July now and pretty much have events planned every Saturday this month. So we'll be talking a little bit about that at the end of the episode. But for now, I want to go ahead and get tonight's guest on. She is the host and producer of the Rogge Report. Her name is Jess Rogge, and she talks about history, conspiracies, UFOs, current events, science, and other unusual phenomena on the Fringe, and I may be saying this incorrectly, on the Fringe FM. So we've got, like I said, we've got a lot of interesting things to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on Jessica. Hey, Jess.
Hi, Miranda. Thank you so much for having me on, and congratulations on the new business. That is so exciting.
Thank you. We've got a lot of really cool things planned, and you know, there's just so much interesting history at this location and in this town that we're so excited to be able to finally make this accessible to the community and be able to share all of this with everyone. So yeah, definitely a lot of exciting things going on.
Congratulations. That sounds like a lot of fun too.
Thank you. So why don't we go ahead and tell everyone who you are and about the Rogge Report and how you got started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jess Rogge. I'm host of the Rogge Report, which airs live every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Fringe FM. I cover topics, like Miranda said, from UFOs to UAPs, conspiracy, history, science. I also do the news, so I'm very on top of everything that's going on. one of my major focuses on the show, though, and in my personal life, is UFOs and UAPs. For the past 10 years, I've been, I've dedicated a lot of time and energy into researching it, going out there and talking to the researchers. Back when we had conferences, I'd go out and actually go talk to them, and now, we've moved everything online. But, this is my passion. This is, I want to find out more about the world we live in. And, I look at it kind of through the window of UAPs.
Nice. And this is an exciting time because we just got the UAP report.
I know this report, everybody's been waiting for it. And we were talking a little bit before the show, and you mentioned, were people disappointed? And yes, they were. They were very disappointed because this was not the UAP task force report they were waiting for. This was the preliminary assessment, which means they're looking at what they need to do and providing a report to Congress so that they can get the funding to do what they need to do next. So, unfortunately, it had very little information.
But I mean, at least it's some information, right?
It's some information. So what they did was they took, all the reports they had, they looked at them, and they were able, out of, I believe, 144 cases, I could be wrong, I might have the number wrong, I'm not going to click on it to look at it right now, but out of all those cases, the small sample of cases, they were able to identify one object. And out of all those objects, yeah, see, Al Cooley says it was, yeah, exactly. That one object was a balloon. So the whole big thing is basically, we don't know what the rest of these things are. This one is a balloon. So there were 5 categories. I can go over them real quick for you if you like. Let me open them here real quick. So they had 5 categories. The first category was airborne clutter. So that includes like not airplanes, but balloons, things like that. Balloons, birds, things that are just floating around in the air. Oh, okay. It was 144. Where is my little note here?
And as Russ said, not to interrupt, but he said little information, but the government confirmed UFOs are real, and that is huge.
That is huge. So what's also really big about this is that this is the beginning to a real modern technological UAP report. We've never had this. We've never had the technology to be able to take the data and look at it in such a way that we've never been able to look at it before, which also makes me believe, because they need to use AI and machine learning to figure this out, that there's going to be a lot that they're looking at. They wouldn't do that. They don't need all that for maybe 200 reports. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, that's the government for you, or even just any good research. There's definitely more out there, and that shows that.
There's so much more out there. And I mean, with this report, we are talking about, like I said, modern times. But if we talk about the last century, we have a lot of cases. We know that, the government talks about the Roswell case. That's one that they do have. They do know about that. We know they know about. We know that we don't know that they have aliens at Area 51, but we know they developed top secret craft there, possibly reverse engineered. Mm-hmm. So, there's a lot of these little things. I have a document that I cover on my channel. It's called Psalm 101, and it's the standard operations manual for extraterrestrial, or for crash retrieval and extraterrestrial, or I think it calls them extraterrestrial biological EBEs, biological beings for body recovery. So this document is from like the 60s. So if that's real, then of course this is something that they've known about. This whole document, and you can find it online. It's public. It's easy to access, but it breaks down everything: how they retrieve the craft, how to report to the newspapers, how to transport these things. It talks about, okay, so if you have a body, how do you take care of it so you don't have contamination? And it talks about the beings. They don't try to ever retrieve a body. They don't come back for them, is what it says. Wow. So if all that's real, then yes, they do have a lot more information. But we're talking about what's going on right now, what the pilots are seeing over our oceans.
Gotcha. And do you think they'll ever go back and look at that, or is that sort of?
Oh, I think definitely. Even in the report, they do mention that they're going to go back into radar data and try to pull information from data that they've had in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think having the radar data, having something, it's like when you go on a paranormal investigation, you're able to record certain things that will, kind of say like, I had an experience and this matches up with what's going on.
Exactly. And, what I was going to say is, I had interrupted you just a little bit earlier. You were going over the 5 different categories on, that this report covered. And, if we could just kind of circle back to that, I think I'd pulled up Russ's comment at that point because it's just exciting stuff. It's huge they did go in and confirm that. So if you don't mind just kind of going into those categories a little bit.
Of course. So the first category is airborne clutter, which is birds, balloons, and recreational or more like civilian drones. They even said things like plastic bags could fall into this category. And the second category is natural atmospheric phenomenon. So that's things like ball lightning, ice crystals, perhaps different planets and stars. They've talked about that before, people misidentifying those things. The third category, which I believe some of these fall into, is U.S. government and industrial development programs. So this is black projects, classified projects. So these are things that even if they're able to identify them, we're not really going to know about that because our classified projects need to remain classified for, national security. Mm-hmm. And then foreign adversary. So the foreign adversary is anything like Russia, China, anything from any of our adversarial nations. Mm-hmm. Also anything that might be there from a non-governmental entity as well. But the most interesting category is other. Other is where all these things fall into except for that one balloon. So that means out of all of those, out of at least 144, they don't know what they are. They can't identify them. I don't know if anybody who's watching has seen, but Jeremy Corbell has been releasing a lot of footage. Mm-hmm. And I know, again, people are not excited about the footage because it looks like lights in the sky. And I know Miranda's a photographer, so I know she knows how hard it is to capture a little bitty thing in the middle of the night with one of these.
Yeah. And I mean, even the moon is impossible to capture if you don't do it just right, just because it's moving. You can't just put a stationary camera on the moon and snap a picture or get a continual picture because you're continually having to move it because it moves little bits, and then we're talking about these lights that are moving faster and, it's nearly impossible to capture something, especially with a cell phone. And that's what most of us have. Most of us don't. Exactly.
No, everybody has like a big SLR camera carrying around ready to go with a huge lens. It's a lot of, they say, a lot of the sailors, they have phones, mm-hmm. But when you zoom in on something and you try to keep that thing steady, it's like,
night pictures are always so challenging too, because, and that's one of the things they talk about with us in the paranormal. A lot of the time you won't see me actually posting very many photos from paranormal investigations rather than beauty shots or shots, because I spend a lot of time beforehand taking photos and video during the daylight. But a lot of the time you're kind of able to explain a lot of these pictures. And most of the time, if you do capture some type of unexplainable phenomenon on a paranormal investigation, it's usually blurry. You're usually zooming in, and of course things are pixelated. And so once you start dealing with pixels, you start dealing with really odd shapes, and the mind wants to try to interpolate what you're seeing in the picture. And it's almost always going to try to interpolate what it knows, which would be a face or a figure. So I can only imagine, how what you all get on from the in the unexplained UFO side of it versus on the paranormal, how hard that would be to identify some of these things.
It's very difficult. Even I have a friend who has, you got to see it, Miranda. He's got like IR cameras, FLIR cameras, a huge SLR camera all set up on this huge tube so that he can shoot up there just in case he catches anything. But even then, with his really like high tech super equipment, they're still like this big. You know what I mean? You still aren't going to see much. They're so tiny. They're so far away.
Absolutely. And, Matt says we need to look into the oceans themselves. The footage from one of the Navy films shows the ship splashing down underwater bases. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, I can get my little, my theory if we want to go a little out there.
Sure, let's go.
I think they're coming in from the Pacific, right? We're seeing them come up from the Pacific and the Atlantic. So I'm thinking, here's my wild. Are you ready?
Yeah.
It's probably not that wild. Other people probably had this thought. But if it is a civilization under there, we know Lemuria. Mm-hmm. And what's the other one? Atlantis.
Yes.
What if these are Lemurians and Atlanteans? Woo! Huh, guys? Some Aquaman for you.
Well, it's something to look at because, people talk about that with the Lemurians. They talk about that with Bigfoot. As far as like the travel and not being able to be seen, that could be related. Do we have more sightings of UFOs over the ocean rather than land?
We have a ton. And, over here I'm in California. So off the coast of California is Catalina Island. And between Catalina all the way down south to San Diego and out there is where all these sightings happen. And there's been a lot of reports of sightings even on Catalina Island. Even if you're on the beach in these areas, you see a lot of stuff over the ocean. Even in Hawaii, they see a lot of stuff over the ocean. And I've even heard cases of these crafts coming out of lakes. So there is something to water. There's a huge thing I'm saying, I've heard of more people saying I've seen them come out of water or emerge from water than they came down. I feel like it could be more from the ocean than from the sky. Maybe they do fly up, but they fly back down.
That makes sense. And actually because that's not my field of study. That's actually the first I've heard, and I haven't really thought a whole lot about that because I typically just think of the sky. So very interesting. Very interesting. Are there hot spots? I know with the paranormal, and I was actually at one of those locations last week that is a hotbed for not only paranormal and unexplained activity, but also there's several different cryptids that are seen there, especially Sasquatch, and also a lot of UFO sightings. And I've found several different clusters that have had that high paranormal activity as well as other types of unexplained activity. Have you found anything kind of like that in your experience, that there are areas that if you go, you're pretty much guaranteed to see something kind of unexplained?
I would think somewhere like Skinwalker Ranch, which is a paranormal hotspot as well, would be somewhere. People say, there is a lady. What is her? I forgot her name. Her name escapes me. It's on the tip of my tongue. Cheryl Costa. Cheryl Costa took all the reports from 2000 to 2000. It was 2017 at the time when I spoke to her. But she took all the reports. She sanitized them. So basically, she just took them to location, shape, and I think location, date, time, and basically like the shape of the craft. So she did this with reports from MUFON and Newfork all across the country. And there are places where they're seen more, but too, it seems that where people are outside more or the more densely populated areas, they're going to see more simply because there's more witnesses. So from that data there, and what she's come to the conclusion is it's happening all the time everywhere. And we're not witnessing it all the time. Most people that report sightings are dog walkers and smokers.
Oh, and that makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Something that Dr. Sumner and I were talking about ourselves that I think really kind of pertains to this is the fact that, like paranormal activity is always happening around us. It happens more frequently than what people expect. People just don't pay attention, or they don't listen or really watch. So I would imagine it's kind of the same thing as we're going about our busy lives. Not a lot of people look up unless it's something kind of dramatic that just kind of catches your eye. They don't really stop.
No, I had a friend who had a sighting, in not too far from me. He was coming out of the gym. It was probably 9 o'clock at night. He noticed 3 orange orbs in the sky. And he said there were other people in the parking lot. He said he's standing there staring at the darn things. He's taking his phone out. He's recording it. He's like looking around. He wants to say, is anybody else seeing this? Nobody cares. They're just in their own world. They're on their business. They're doing their business. They're not looking up. So I think it happens a lot, but I do want to come back to the hotspot thing. I think there are areas, where UFOs are seen more. And, they said recently in Japan, they've opened a UFO research center in Fukushima. Fukushima is where we had the huge nuclear disaster back in 2011. So they've had a lot of UFO sightings there. Also, a lot of the sightings, there's a lot of sightings that happen around Vegas too. They also used to do nukes around Vegas, So there's something to that as well too. I think there's something about the energy that also may attract them.
Okay. And that makes sense. Plus, I don't know what is the terrain like there in Fukushima? Is it mountainous, or is it kind of open?
I think it's open. I think they maybe have some hills or mountains, but it's that whole area. I don't remember if you remember all the water coming in, so it wasn't too high.
Right. Right. Because I know Vegas has got, they've got the open desert, and then exactly. But they've also got, some mountain ranges there. So, very interesting. And that's the thing about this location there in Kentucky. I mean, several of the places, here in East Tennessee, I mean, we've got mountains everywhere, but then the terrain really opens up in Middle Tennessee, and it's the same way there in Kentucky. It just looks like a totally different area.
That's interesting. And so that makes me wonder, like, what is in the ground there? Is the stone a certain type of rock or certain type of energy as well? Makes me wonder.
Good point. I mean, and good point about that with the water, because I know and I'm just kind of paralleling, with what I know in the paranormal. The water is, if you have a location that's on the water or has underground water systems or whatever, great conductor. So it's interesting that there are, some of these different and we have a comment here about quartz, that sort of thing. So it's interesting about the different geology and the landscapes that can tie all of these together. And that's just interesting to me when you start looking at those sort of classifications of things to see what fits.
Yeah, exactly. I love to break it down and look at these little things and try to figure out, what are the commonalities?
Exactly. And you touched on something a few minutes ago when you were talking about in the cities, and where more people will, if there's a higher concentration of population, they're more likely to, experience things. Do you believe that, I'm trying to think of the best way to word this question, but do you believe that a lot of people believe in this, and the fact that more people are seeing this type of phenomena, that, people are just kind of about it?
I think some people are kind of about it, but then there's some people who are super excited about it. They just want to believe. Recently, the Pew Research Center did a survey just right before this report came out. And they said, I think at least 51% of people believe that there's extraterrestrials, and they believe they come from another planet. So that was about 10,000 people they surveyed. But overall, I think, and my view is so skewed because of the community that I live in 24 hours a day, is everybody believes. But when I hop out, and talk to a normal person, a lot of friends know what I do. They don't even mention it. So the UFO thing doesn't even get to them. They don't. So I think for some people, unless it affects them, then they don't care.
That makes sense. Well, I kind of wondered how the reaction would be if the government actually came out and said, just point blank, said, we have the body, we believe, and Al Cooley, he hit on it when I had him on my show. He was saying, we weren't even able to handle the toilet paper crisis.
No.
Can we truly handle that about?
It's like, it's really baby steps here. And no, we can't. People freak out last year over toilet paper, and it was like, what's the next thing they're going to freak out? Everybody wants yeast, and it's just like, okay, the thing is, really, if we really get into it, we talk about the beings that people have said they've seen, and we talk about what those people experience, and people wouldn't, I feel like a normal person would be very scared. Yes. Very scared. We're not talking just like about, if they were cute little things, like, sure, sure, nobody cares. They're cute. Yeah, they're not evil. They're furry little things with antennas or something, but that's probably not it. There's I don't hear a lot of reports of cute little aliens. I do hear reports of 9-foot mantid beings. You know what I mean? I hear reports of gray aliens. I hear reports of troll-like beings. If they were humanoids, I think we would be a lot easy. It would be an easier transition for everybody. But I think as overall humanity, or at least the United States, needs it to be a little bit slow. We're not good with change,
right?
To be really slow. I don't want, and I said this I think on my show last night, I don't want somebody's 87-year-old mother or grandmother having a heart attack because they told her that there's like reptilians out there, so we have to, and I don't know if there's reptilians, but we have to take it slow.
Right. Because that is huge, because that would actually really, if they did come out and say that would shake, I think it'd be safe to say, the majority of people's hardcore belief systems. That could change the total structure of the way some people think, because they've thought that way for, hundreds of years.
Exactly. Like, it's going to change people's paradigms. It's going to change everything. They're going to say, oh, well, and the thing is too, we've existed this long believing that we are the top dog on this planet. We've acted like we are the top dog. We have destroyed the planet. We have hurt animals. We have done horrible things to one another. We are not the top dog. And that is, I think, scary for a lot of people.
I agree.
Because we know what we did to everybody else.
Yeah. So
that's why you're scared.
Yeah. And and just thinking that somebody else, knows all about this, and and not telling us, I don't know. It's just one of those things that I think, as you said, and as Al Cooley over here said, baby steps. Those are definitely, yeah.
Baby steps. I think it's just, it takes time. It's not something that we can do overnight. The people in the community believe that we can do this overnight, but we cannot. It's taken since 2017 till now to get this far.
Exactly. And and I'm looking over here in the comments. Sandy Wells says in Washington State, there are lots of UFO sightings. One of the first sightings in the U.S. reported was over Mount Rainier by a pilot.
Yes. And I don't know about, and I'll say this and I might piss people off, but he didn't see any flying saucers. He saw wing-shaped craft, which the Germans have and which we have, so the first sighting of a UFO in the United States is a little bit of a misnomer, it's not a UFO. It was a flying, he said it flew in the air like a saucer.
Gotcha.
The shape of the disc is actually, I guess I could just do it for you real quick.
Yeah.
And let's see here. So it was actually more like this, and you can see it online. He has a drawing of it, but they're more like this. They're more wing shaped. I don't know if you guys can see that. And then it goes in
Okay.
here. There's a little thing here, but like they were flying like that. So there was a group of them. And other people saw them too. I mean, they could have been UFOs, but I'm also saying that there were craft in existence
Mm-hmm.
that were very similar. So, take it for what it's worth. That's what I've looked up.
No, that's great. That's great. And I think that that's probably one of those things where, I mean, you probably hear that a lot. We hear that a lot in the paranormal. I mean, just from the different types of sightings that are out there. And that's why I like that open dialogue, because, with something that I've seen or experienced on an investigation, when, you start talking to someone else, if they can explain, then I am totally open for that dialogue, because I've not seen or heard it all,
Yes. You guys, you can look it up. There's the Horton brothers. They worked for the Germans. They were working on this wing-shaped craft, which we took, and we also started developing, which is the forerunner of that, the B-2 bomber, that looks kind of like, So that's that, all those things, the flying wing has been around for a long time. They even developed flying saucers. We were working on them too.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't work very well, but we had, we worked on them. We tried.
Exactly.
So Nazis. So we had those craft at the time.
What about, we have another comment. Whoops, I hit my thing jumped on me here. Some have been visited and not seen a ship. What are your thoughts on people who have been visited, chipped? I know this may be going off into a whole different topic.
A little, yeah, but I'm familiar with it all. I try to stay nuts and bolts, but I'm very Valayan on this. I believe what Jack Valet said. I've read his book, and it makes sense, because things, even like succubus, have been going on for a long time. And, and then there's also stories of ETs doing similar things to people. Mm-hmm. What if, Jack Valet says this is like the folklore stories are talking about these things that have always existed. Mm-hmm. What if they're just interdimensional? Mm-hmm. They exist, and we've always had them, but we've called them different things. Before they were fairies, sometimes they're ghosts, now they're aliens. That's what makes me wonder when people say, I didn't see a ship. Some people see a ship, but too, it's like there are a lot of people that don't see ships. So I wonder if that is something else.
And that's a very good point, because you hear different stories of people who, lost time, and people who have been visited, and just certain things happen. Is there a certain, I guess, why are some people visited and some not? Are there any type of characteristics?
Well, I had a guest on just 2 weeks ago. His name's Preston Dennett, and he's been researching UFOs for 35 years. He works with MUFON, and he just takes cases and cases and cases. So he knows he's got a lot up in there. So what he says is that a lot of people that he said a lot of people get abducted, but you notice too, a lot of people get abducted are people who are going to share a message, people who are going to say what's going on in a positive sense. I guess we're talking more about the positive experiencer cases versus an abduction case. But, he says like doctors, teachers, people like that, they're going to be podcasters, movie stars, singers, people who will say something, people, but then also it's normal people, just normal everyday people that, will share that with other people. And I speak to a lot of experiencers and abductees. We call abductees are the ones that don't like it. Experiencers are the ones that have gotten a little more comfortable with it. It's not so scary. Right. But it's across the board. I tell a story of a gentleman that messaged me on Instagram, and he, a lot of the time this happens to them lifelong. This is something that always happened since they were children. So this guy told me, he said, Jess, I wanted to escape them, and it wouldn't stop. It wouldn't stop. He says, I joined the military, Jess. I haven't heard from this guy in years. I hope he's okay. But he says, I joined the military so that, I would be around the world and they wouldn't be able to find me. And he said, you know what? They still found me. And he said, all I can do now is just accept that they're going to take me, and there's nothing I can do about it. And it was very somber, very somber. and some people feel differently. Like I've met people who had such beautiful experiences, bringing them to tears, crying that they would love to see these people again.
Wow.
So, I've heard both sides. I've heard about, the probing. I had a man cry and tell me about his probing. Like, this is real PTSD that happened to this man. What happened? I don't know.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting, though, the point that you bring up about the fact that it typically is the folks that are going to share the story and tell about the experience. So do you believe that they have a message that they want to get to us?
They say, and this is according to Preston, because Preston's done a hell of a lot more research than I have, but he says that even if you go with the Ariel school children incident in Zimbabwe, they don't want, the messages are like, take care of the planet, don't destroy the planet, like keep the air clean. Why are you making it dirty? That's what you breathe. Why are you guys using nuclear? That's not good. Basically, which leads me to believe they share this planet with us because they don't want us to F it up.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And to your point, Russ says that I need to interview Preston. I think I saw where when I was scrolling through your interviews, I think I saw where you had interviewed him, and I've not had the chance to listen to that one yet. So I will definitely
check that one out.
I will definitely do that and maybe look into contacting him to have him on. We've had a lot of comments here in the chat room that I'm going to pull up here. Robert says it's like Godzilla movies, knowing there's a bigger force out there than humans. And yes. I completely agree with that because, I mean, I feel like I don't know what it is, but I feel like to think that we are alone and that we are the only ones out there is a very narrow-minded, closed-minded thing. I mean, I don't see how that's possible, just as vast as everything, as space is. David Flowers says, hello, Jess. Have you heard of the CE5 movement and Stephen Greer? Guided group meditation to try to make contact. And it's funny he says that because I had listened to a podcast on the Paranormal Rush Hour where he was talking about this, and I wanted to bring that up as well to get your thoughts on that.
So I am probably back in 2011, I was like almost going to go do one with Stephen Greer. I was almost going to go do E5. I watched all this stuff, but the lady I was going to go with, anyways, didn't work out, wasn't meant to be. I didn't get to go. But yes, no, in the beginning, I spent a lot of time looking at, the CE5s and what Stephen Greer did. I have not done a CE5. I'm kind of, to me, it's a little scary. I am a little afraid of being like, I'm going to call y'all in, it's a little scary to me. It's like, it's a little culty, and I'm not like comfortable with that. I feel like, but I have sat in the backyard and I have said, come on, aliens, show yourselves. You know what I mean? Like, But, if you're comfortable going out and doing that, I don't like, I'm very careful with my energy. I don't like to meditate with people I don't know.
And that's a good point because, it's one thing to go out, do a meditation. And that's what the Paranormal Rush Hour was talking about. They were talking about the guided meditations, but then they were also talking about going in, and it was talking about steps of kind of doing this yourself. To me, it kind of puts me in mind sort of as a seance in the paranormal community. I don't participate in those. And I'm like you really have to be careful of your energy and who you surround yourself with, what you do, because the mind and our energy is very, very powerful. And you don't want to do something that either is going to mess things up, would be hard to undo. So I can absolutely appreciate that. But he was talking about the same thing as far as going out and trying to sort of call things in. And he was talking about some different experiences that he himself and several others had that they believed that they had actually made contact with something, which, gets kind of out there. I can understand a group and the power of that. But an individual, it's just interesting to me.
It is very interesting. And yeah, I like that you say it's kind of like a seance, you're asking something to come in.
Yes.
And if you think of like ghosts and the paranormal on our level, like and then we think of them being out there on a bigger level, I don't want to call anything in. Hey guys, let's not.
No, very good point. Very good point. Christy says, what about the phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch?
What do you want to talk about the phenomenon there? The thing is there, it's like so many things happen, from werewolves to, my favorite is the predator-like being that they couldn't see, that was camouflaged. They had animals die there horribly. They've seen UFOs there. It's interesting. I looked at the map. I said, well, if they did nuclear tests here, where did the fallout go?
Right.
Jess is all about, like, it tore the nuclear stuff tears a fabric through space-time and, thins the veil. I think the veil there is very thin. That's what I think about Skinwalker.
Gotcha. I was going to ask what your theory was on that. And that's a very good theory. Let's see. Robert says, my people have old stories about beings that can go between world dimensions and realities. And I think, and I think that is kind of, in my mind, where the paranormal and all these other supernatural unexplained phenomena could actually be related in a way.
Yeah. I do. I think I believe what Robert says. I mean, those old stories, it makes sense. There's dimensions. There's probably dimensions in reality. It's just, the more you get into it and you try to figure it out, it's just like things do make sense, but they don't. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And Matthew hit the nail on the head with, if anyone has ever looked at cryptids, UAPs, ghosts, anything that blinks out of existence, it's possible that these dimensional beings that are our perceptions in the third dimension just can't fully see. Exactly.
I agree with that statement 100%. It's you can't, all those things, they're hard to take pictures of unless they're fake.
Yeah. Anytime it's like I said, I won't post a lot of pictures because a lot of the time you can explain them. And a lot of the time it's just, we just can't capture it accurately enough to show. I mean, there is almost always an explanation for that sort of thing. And, I was never really too into Bigfoot and some cryptids, because they are hard to understand and it's hard for my mind to comprehend. Well, something like this, how do you not see it? But once you get out in the Appalachian Mountains, the Rocky Mountains, start exploring the ocean and some of these, the Great Lakes with the lake monsters and all of this, all of that is so vast, you can kind of start to understand how things could kind of keep hidden. And if it is passing through dimensions, that just makes even more sense.
Exactly. I had the same feelings as you. I used to say, well, whatever on Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Like, how you guys believe in Bigfoot? But no, as I've gotten in here further and I started to think like you did, I'm like, well, no, Bigfoot is part of the same thing. They're all dimensional or reality based, or there's some frequency that we see sometimes, or also certain people see it.
And that's true. That's true because, I mean, in the paranormal, we see there are so many people with different types of spiritual gifts that can see, some can hear, some can feel. And that's always been fascinating to me. So I think that relates. I mean, just because I don't see something and you do doesn't mean that it's not there, or it doesn't exist.
Exactly. That's why I think, the UFO thing and the paranormal, it's just so tied. It really is. Like, people, I hope that, people will report everything, I don't even think, is there even a place for people to report ghost sightings? Like, is that even being collected anywhere?
Not really. And that's been something that's been the topic of debate as of late in the last I would say probably in the last year and a half. Obviously you can reach out to your local paranormal investigator, or to some of them. I think there's been a push to try to get people to reach out to the news media or to different news sources, not so much to be made famous or whatever with a TV show, but just to kind of validate that data. But there has been push for a sort of national database of when these investigators go to investigate a location, they can put this in. If someone has a paranormal experience, they can report it. It's tough because within the paranormal community, we can't even agree on what a ghost is. There's
like UFO community.
Yeah, exactly, because is it an elemental? Is it an actual person that was once human that has passed on? Is it someone in another dimension? Is it a time slip? I mean, there are so many different things exactly that, we can't even really agree on. And so, you know how it is when it comes to the scientific method and looking at all of this under the lens of science, it would be very, very hard because you would really have to have a very controlled environment. And with thousands of paranormal investigators out there, that would be really hard to not only get them to investigate a certain way, use the same types of tools. I mean, I think you would really have to kind of standardize things to get this to work. And I think it would be very hard. However, it would be nice to have sort of a database of at least experiences that people have experienced. Maybe not so much the scientific data from a paranormal investigation, but somewhere where, people can document, well, the voice that I heard had this specific accent. The weather was like this, certain things on a more personal type, physical type level. I mean, that's just my opinion. But to this date, there really isn't anywhere that anyone can, report that data to.
Because it's a lot of work too, to be able to have to create that and then tell everybody about it and then get them to use it. Yeah. So that's quite an undertaking. Because I wanted to say, as we're moving into UFO disclosure and UAPs, we have to, the conversation's gonna start. We have to start talking about, ghosts are real too. Like why aren't we talking about this?
Exactly. And let's see. Like I said, I don't want to lose track of the comments over here. Sandy says, I believe somehow we are connected to these beings, both spiritually and mentally. A strange thought, maybe. No, I mean, that makes sense. And let's see.
The consciousness connection.
Yes. And I think that's where the whole calling the UFOs in or whatever could kind of that gets into the whole, do they read our minds? I mean, are we sending what is that?
They say they're telepathic. They communicate. They don't speak to you. They just send thoughts and feelings, like when you talk to a dog or a cat.
Okay, I hadn't heard it explained that way, but that makes sense. Matthew says, have you seen Alan Greenfield's work using the secret cipher that uses Crowley's Book of the Law?
I have not. That whole sentence sounds super interesting, so I'm going to write down what you're talking about.
I'll leave it up there on the screen because I think I was speaking a foreign language there but it sounds very interesting.
Yeah, it does, right? I'm like, okay, secret cipher. I know who Crowley is. I'm not sure who Alan Greenfield is, but I'm going to find out.
Very cool. Great question, Matthew. Thank you.
Cipher. So no, I have not, but I'm willing to learn more.
Well, and that ties into Russ says, ask what do you think about Aleister Crowley's channeling of Lamb?
Gosh darn you, Russ. So there is an image of the drawing when Aleister Crowley contacted this being called Lamb. I wish I had the picture. Oh, maybe I haven't. No, I don't think I have it. I don't have it ready. But anyways, he's a big-headed, being.
Wonder if I can find it while you're talking, and I'll pull it up.
Type in, I think, Lamb, Lam, and then Crowley. If you pull it up, then I can talk about it. I didn't know Russ was going to bring this one out.
I think I found it here.
He has a big head. It's like a pencil drawing, I think.
I tell you, Aleister Crowley has always been fascinating.
Yes.
To me. And then just everything I can get it over into whole topics with Led Zeppelin and all of that when it comes to talking about him. But go ahead. I'm going to see if I can find that.
So Crowley, or Aleister Crowley, contacted this being, and the being's name was Lamb. And this being looks somewhat like an archetypal gray. So what I like to show Russ, what I showed Russ the other day with the image, if we pull up the image, and I'll show you guys what I saw. But okay. But it's very gray-like. When I say gray, I mean the bulbous head with the big eyes, a little tiny nose, and a little mouth. And when you see this guy Lamb, he has normal eyes, but they're little. But if you click on that, if you see that black and white one, you click on that black, the one that's reversed there.
Okay.
If you click on that one there, and you look at it, and it looks much more like a gray. If you see under the part of his head where it goes like this, there seems to be two circles here. So if we look at it like that, that is 100% what a gray looks like.
Okay.
So was he in contact with the interdimensional being that was actually a gray or gray-like?
Very interesting.
And that thing is so creepy looking.
It really is. It really is.
So, so if they're interdimensional from other realities, or they summoned them in from another dimension, maybe they did. Maybe that's what happened. It's hard to say. I don't know enough about it to say if they were summoned in.
Right. Okay. So Michelle, who made the comment earlier about being contacted but not seeing, she says they do receive messages, but they also receive revelations. You just want to stay isolated. My mother and I had an encounter when I was very young. Long story, many years later, during my chiropractic visits, she wanted to do a deeper x-ray and found a small metal fragment inside me. She asked me if I had ever been shot. No, I was told to use my EMF to see if I'd go off, and it did. I'm now looking for someone to reread my x-rays to see why she thought I'd been shot. Oh, wow. I actually remember Michelle making that post and showing that x-ray on there.
Yeah. I was going to say, I know a story that Preston talks about with a gentleman that they found this. It was a kid. He had a metal circle under his molar. And they said, "Were you shot?" Similar story to Michelle's. And him and his mother said, "No, he's like a little kid." Well, they keep going back to the dentist, years later, it's still there. And interestingly, in one image, and Preston has these too, it's you can see that it's there in one x-ray, and the next x-ray, it's gone. Next x-ray, it's back.
Wow. And it's not a glitch with...
It's not, it was an old timey, like film. Okay. Like, they Gotcha. Stick the film in, they shoot your mouth, they pull it out. Yes. So that is interesting. It sounds similar to what happened to Michelle, where she has that implant. And, we used to have a doctor, Dr. Roger Lear. He used to remove the implants for people, but he's since passed away. So I don't know anybody currently who's doing that work.
Did all the implants look the same?
They're like little metal things. Like, they look different. Sometimes they just look like little things. I've talked to some abductees, and this is just what they're saying. I don't know for sure, but they said they believe that the implants more recently now will they'll disintegrate, like disintegratable stitches. Like they're not big metal pieces anymore.
Oh, very interesting. I remember seeing hers, and I feel like it was like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, but I think it was like kind of in her shoulder, like was the x-ray she posted.
It makes no sense. Like, why would a piece of metal be there?
Right. I mean, I would be afraid, I think, of what would happen if they took it out, but then I would be afraid to leave it in. I mean, not being in that situation, it's hard to say how you would feel and what you would do, but
Exactly.
it's just odd for something to be there and there be no reason for it.
Exactly. So I hope that Michelle can find somebody who can look at that and give her more information. But no, that's definitely really interesting.
Absolutely. I agree. And Robert says the implants are upgrading, which makes sense.
As our tech goes up, so does their tech, right? Our tech is what they say, like maybe 1,000 years behind alien or alien tech. So they have to have way better stuff than bio stuff now. Who knows what they got?
Right. Let's see. And Sam, to jump back to where we were talking about the database, Sam says the hard part would be keeping the trolls from putting in bogus reports and info. And I completely agree with that. I am a very scientific person when it comes to the research of the paranormal, but I am not really a big advocate of that type of database just for that purpose and just for the fact that I just don't see how it could be possible, at least from the scientific locations. Let's see. Al says, I have to get used to the UAP versus UFO. You want to talk a minute about that? Because honestly, this last year was probably the first I had heard a UAP. Again, I'm not in that world. So that's the first I had heard of that. What is the difference between a UAP and a UFO?
A UFO, typically, like a UFO, it stands for unidentified flying saucer, or object. And when you think of that, immediately you're like, okay, you think of this little like 1950s looking flying saucer flying around, and then you're like, oh, and then immediately you're like thinking of wacky abductee stories, you know, like all the wacky stuff. So that's kind of like UFO. I think of UFO as what it was in the last century. And because there was a lot done to make people, to ridicule people who believed in UFOs or had sightings or had things like that. I also think the change in the vernacular helps with that too, because we're moving into a new time. We're in the modern times now. We're talking about unidentified aerial phenomena. Because this is a phenomenon that is happening all around the world. These are things happening in the air, and they're unidentified. And sometimes they might not be crafts. There might be huge biological beings up there in the sky, which some people say that they've recorded. So we can't say it's a craft if it could be a giant squid being that flies in our upper atmosphere.
That's true. And I mean, isn't it amazing how just the change in words or vernacular or just the way we look at that, how that changes our perception of things?
Yeah, because now you're looking at UAPs. UAPs are being studied by the government. Scientists like Avi Loeb, who's from Harvard's looking at this. We've got big people looking at the UAP phenomenon. And I still say UFO, UAP as we transition, but really now we're in the era of UAP. And I know some people really love UFO, and that's okay. But when I think UFO, I think little green man with the flying saucer.
Yeah.
When I think UAP, I think about this phenomenon that is happening worldwide, that our pilots are seeing, that's happening everywhere, and we don't know what it is.
Well, and it seems like it just adds more credence to it once you have, educated minds that are devoting time, and more importantly, when you're looking at the government, devoting money to these studies to actually try to figure out what this is.
We have big brains, physicists, astronomers, people who know this stuff. Yeah, I don't know that kind of stuff. I can talk about it, but these are the people that can really get in and talk about the physics behind what's going on, because there are scientists looking at the physics of these objects. So, it's great that we can finally have, it's not a joke. It's not like, haha, that person believes in UFOs. It's like, no, this person is researching a phenomenon that's happening worldwide that we need to know. What is it? What is it? Why is it happening?
Exactly. And And let's see, Darren says, so is there an Area 51 and has everything moved to Area 52?
I think there's still an Area 51 and 52, but there's probably a lot of it's underground. But I know they're still flying stuff out over in Vegas, out over there in Area 51.
Very cool. And again, thank you everyone for your questions and comments. You all have kept me hopping tonight. And I'm going to see if there are any more here. Matthew also says, if you're interested in Lamb, Kenneth Grant touches on him quite a bit. He was a student of Crowley and carried on the traditions.
Kenneth
Wonderful.
Grant. It sounds like Matthew knows a lot about Crowley and I don't. That's something I need to get into a little more.
Matthew is in my hometown area and has a great site that talks about some of the different things. And he also mentioned on here, because I know there's a lot of people from, currently I'm down in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area,
nice.
But in the northern Tennessee area, there's a lot of strange and unexplained there. And he goes on to say that for the local folks, one of the 700 or so unidentified cases during Project Blue Book happened at Lake City, which is now Rocky Top, which was also Coal Creek. This town has changed its names a lot. And there was even a Blue Book entry for Oneida. So for the local folks out there, I've seen a couple comments going back and forth talking about some of the different things that have happened in the Rocky Top, Coal Creek area. So thank you, Matthew, for adding that. And I also saw earlier in the comments, let's see, Sandy asked, let's see. She says, how or where do we watch or listen to Jess Rogge's show?
Thank you, Sandra. You can catch my show live Wednesday nights on the fringe.fm, or you can go to theroggereport.com. I have a player that plays the show live every Wednesday. It also has my show archive, so you can go back. And I do have an episode with Miranda on there just from a couple weeks ago. So if you didn't check that out, check it out. It's a great episode.
Yes, thank you. And, I've just really enjoyed chatting with you, because I know we've chatted on that episode and we chatted a little bit off the air. So thank you for opening my mind and enlightening me and sharing that with everyone here on my show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was a ball. Anytime.
And, again, thank you everyone over in the chat room for your comments, for your questions. If anyone wants to reach out to you, what is the best way? I know you said where they can listen to your show, but if they want to talk to you about anything UFO and UAP related,
you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter. I think that's all. Is that all the social medias? I'm on all the social medias. If you follow me, it's at the Rogge Report, ROGGE. If I don't get back to you right away, it's because I have 1 billion of these accounts right on each thing. So I try to check my messages regularly. But Facebook, generally, I'll get back to you a little faster, I guess. Instagram.
And the Rogge Report, you had said, so your news report, that comes out, what is that, every week that you update that, or is that?
Yeah, so I do
3 once a week.
It's 5 nights a week. It plays on the Fringe FM, sometimes at the top of the hour, sometimes at the at the mid-hour point. But it's a 3-minute segment. I create a new segment every day. So I get up early, I look at the news, I make a segment, I send it into the station, and then they play it. So you can catch that 5 nights a week. I play it at the beginning of my show, and I know that Joe Root plays it at least, I think, at the midway point at his show. So that's like. So for me, I play it on. There's no schedule for that. It comes up in the breaks.
Gotcha. I just wasn't sure how often you updated the news on it, because I know right now you're really hopping with a lot of news.
Lots of news, lots of UFO news, and it's constant right now. And for somebody like me, who's been looking at this for a while, 10 years ago we were just reading about old accounts, and now we have new stuff happening. So this is the most exciting time for me.
Yes, definitely exciting times. So with that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Like I said, thank you, Jess, for coming on tonight. Thank you, everyone in the chat room. You guys are amazing. This show will also re-air on YouTube here a little bit later tonight, and then on mymix1041.com on Saturday night. So, few little things. Like I said, we talked a little bit in the beginning of the show, just going to go into a few things that's going on in July. Next Thursday night, I'm going to have the guys from the podcast Chasing Ghosts in Bars on Scooters. Or no, I may have said that backwards. Chasing Ghosts on Scooters in Bars. These guys, they're out in on the West Coast as well. They have a podcast. Yeah, and they travel around on their scooters, and they go to different haunted bars and have drinks at these bars and share stories from different paranormal accounts that goes on there. I think that these guys are actually out of Washington, and so they will be my guest next Thursday night at 9 p.m. And this coming weekend, 4th of July festival. So happy birthday to our nation, and hope you guys are out celebrating. I'm going to be I'm going to be in my hometown of Oneida, and going to be out at the Huntsville Firemen's 4th Festival. We'll be be in the parade with Ghost Biker Motorcycle and all of that good stuff. And also going to be out at Dr. Christy Sumner and I, we're going to be out at the historic Scott County Jail this weekend. It's not a grand opening, but we want to be able to spread the word to the community. So we will actually be at the jail and, handing out flyers and that sort of thing to the local community to get the word out on that. So that's this coming Saturday. I think Sunday. I think the parade is at 7 p.m. And then also next Saturday, we're going to be honoring our veterans in Oneida, Tennessee as well. So I'll be back up in the county with at that event from 6 to 9 p.m. It's sponsored by Music on Main, honoring veterans and history in the streets, where we'll be sharing history and everything that's local to the Oneida, Tennessee area. And then June 17th, I'll be in Ann Arbor, Michigan at the Lost Cryptids Conservatory Bigfoot Convention in Michigan. That's going to be on Saturday. I don't have the time that I'll be speaking, but we'll be up there. And then also on July 31st at the Old Stone Jail in Franklin, Kentucky, they're having their second annual paranormal meet and greet. And so there's going to be paranormal folks from all over the South. And I think they're coming as far south as Florida and Mississippi, and coming from all over to the little jail for the second annual meet and greet. So a lot going on here in July, and hope to see you guys at some of those different events. If not, I hope that we will see you next Thursday night on the show. So take care, everybody, and we'll be talking to you soon.